Hello, everyone. Nice to be back. Feels like it's been years, months back. So much time and so many things have happened. Baruch Hashem, we had a beautiful trip overseas, and we have married off Betzalel. For those of you who still think he's a baby, message me and I'll send you pictures of him all grown up. Yes. Yeah, all grown up. So Baruch Hashem, really special, and to see all the others. Even Mecholi flew in with his Mendela. So it was a very, very special time for us, Baruch Hashem. And now we are back in routine and learning Tehillim. So the Tehillim that I chose for today is Kuf Lamed Zayin 137. It's one that you will you will be familiar with it somewhat, at least, and if not with the whole of it, you will be familiar with some of the lines in it. It's a short capital of Tehillim, and it speaks about the destructions of the Beis Hamikdash, hence the reason I chose it for today, and the story that goes with it. On days where, like when we bench, like on Shabbos and Yom Tov, then we say Shir HaMalot. We always begin, before we bench, the introductory paragraph is Shir HaMalot. And on days where we say Tachanun, then the custom is to say this capital of Tehillim, Al Naharos Bavel, as the introductory chapter. So lots of questions of why we do that. Simplest answer for that is that we've just eaten and our stomachs are full, and before we start to bench and thank Hashem for filling our stomachs, we remind ourselves, probably more than anybody else, that although our stomachs are full, our hearts are not full. As long as we are in Galus, even if it feels like we had a good meal and we're living a good life and everything seems wonderful, we are remembering the fact that we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, that we are really still in Galus, and therefore at this time when we're feeling full, we say Al Naharos Bavel. We also have an obligation to remember the destruction of Yerushalayim every single day, and so this actually fulfills that obligation. When we say Al Naharos Bavel, we are remembering Yerushalayim, and we fulfill that obligation as well. And so the Chachamim thought that since people would bench every day, then that's a good time to put in a Remember Yerushalayim paragraph to help us fulfill that obligation. For those of you who get up and say Tikkun Chatzos, I don't know, while I was in America, I said something about Tikkun Chatzos, and my daughter Hanala said, "Oh, is that what you say for 4 days before Rosh Hashanah?" So I quickly found out that not everybody knows what Tikkun Chatzos is. So Tikkun Chatzos is what Tzaddikim say in the middle of the night. They get up as like at the midnight, and this is according to the Zohar, this is the time that Hashem enters Gan Eden, whatever that means, and he walks around Gan Eden with the tzaddikim, whose neshamas are in Gan Eden, and tzaddikim in this world get up at midnight, and at that time of mercy, they daven, weep about the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, and daven for it to be rebuilt. And the very first words that are said in the formal prayer of Tikkun Chatzos is this chapter of Tehillim, Al Naharos Bavel. This also in the Sephardi tradition, this chapter of Tehillim is said on Tisha B'Av, and it makes sense once you see it. It's written quite harshly in Sephardi tradition, because if you look at the chapter before, 136, that chapter is what we call the Hallel Hagadol, the big Hallel, with all the words Hodod Hashem Kitov, praises Hashem because he's good. And then suddenly is this chapter 137, which goes Al Naharat Bavel and speaks about the destruction. And by Sephardi tradition, it says that if a person would take the Hallel HaGadol seriously, and they would really say it with all the correct kavanah, all the correct intentions, they would bring about the Geula. But since we didn't bring about the Geula, we say Al Naharat Bavel, let's talk about the destruction. So it's quite a harsh explanation. So let's look at the kapitel itself. By most opinions, written by David HaMelech, which is quite fascinating, always fascinating when a kapitel of Tehillim is happens long after David HaMelech's life. So David HaMelech didn't even see the Beit HaMikdash, never mind the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, and yet he wrote and included chapter 137 in Sefer Tehillim prophetically, and he's speaking about both destructions of the Beit HaMikdash. In this chapter, you'll see that he mentions Bavel, that's in the very first line, Al Naharat Bavel, and then I think it's in about the seventh line where he speaks about Zachar Hashem Livnei Edom. Remember Hashem about Edom, that's the Romans, the second, and the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. So clearly this chapter is speaking about both destructions of both the first and the second Beis HaMikdash. Another more traditional explanation is that this song was composed by the Leviim when they were being taken as prisoners into Bavel. And again, fascinating that David HaMelech prophesied about what the Leviim would sing, what they would be saying at that time, and he included what they would only compose then into Sefer Tehillim already in his own time. So looking at the kapitel of Tehillim itself, begins with the words Al Naharat Bavel, on the rivers of Bavel, Sham Yashavnu, there we sat, Gam Bachinu, also we cried, B'Zachrenu et Zion, when we remembered Zion. I actually remember as a teenager, I went into a dress shop in Yeovil in those days, and I was standing in the changing room trying on different clothing. The song of the moment was On the Rivers of Babylon. Still fascinates me why they made a song that everyone's walking around singing, and still till today you can tell people about the song On the Rivers of Babylon, and just about everyone knows the chorus. So there we sat and cried. Why that's a song, I'm not sure, but that is the first line of this chapter of Tehillim. On the rivers of Babylon, there we sat, and also we cried when we remembered Zion. So I'm going to take you to two different explanations of this line of Tehillim, two different pictures that this line that David HaMelech is painting for us. So the first one is that of the Yidden being taken into Galus. Nebuchadnezzar has just destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Him and his army were very bad to the Yidden. They were taken in chains and marched from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, which is, if you want to think about it in today's maps, from Israel to Iraq. And he took them, and he was really bad to them. He was very scared that the Jews would daven and they would cry out to Hashem, and Hashem would forgive them, and his whole effort would have been for nothing. And so his plan was that they may not sit down until they reached Bavel. So when they say this literally, okay, Al Naharat Bavel, and we came to the rivers of Bavel, Sham Yashavnu, there we were able finally to sit down. Okay, they had been walking this whole time, pure cruelty or extra cruelty on the part of Nebuchadnezzar. Also, the Talmud tells that the river, the Babylonian river, the one we call Euphrates, that river was so polluted and so full of illness and germs and everything, that when the Yidden washed themselves, drank from the water, washed their faces, and tried to get some relief from this terrible walk that they had just made, so the Talmud says that more people died as a result of drinking that water than Nebuchadnezzar had killed in Israel. So yes, this is like a really horrible picture that painting the rivers of Babylon. There we finally sat down and we cried as we thought about what we had just lost, the Beit HaMikdash being destroyed. Interesting wording also, gam bachinu, we also cried. So that means someone else was crying if we also cried. And from here we have tradition that when the Yidden cry, Hashem cries also. In fact, Hashem cries first. And so if the Yidden were going into Galus and they were crying out in pain and in horror, so Gam bachinu, we also cried. Hashem was crying there first. For anyone who just joined, we are doing Psalm 137. Okay, so that's the first picture. Understanding this pasuk according to the first picture. The second picture that the commentaries paint for us of this is the Jews have gone to live in Galus. They're living in Bavel, and it's quite a nice life. They've settled in. They've got nice houses, they've got beautiful gardens, they've got parks. They can go on Sunday and sit on the side of the river. There's beautiful willow trees over there. They can picnic, and there they are in Galus. That's the picture. Al Naharos Bavel, on the rivers of Babylon. Sham yashavnu, there we settled. Okay, there we were living a good life. However, even when we're living a good life, gam bachinu b'zachrenu et Zion, there we cried when we remembered Zion. And this is like a very, very strong lesson for us, because thank God, most of the time we have good galus, right? We live in nice places, and we don't suffer galus too much in like when I'm talking about like our homes, our places, and such. And we have to remember that no matter how beautiful our house is, and no matter how beautiful our cars and our holidays and our picnic spots and whatever else it is, we have to remember that no matter how settled we are, gam bachinu, we still have to cry b'zachrenu et Zion when we remember Zion. And it is such a fascinating thing, and I think such an amazing thing every year when we go through the 9 days. And I think to myself, and I was actually expressing it to my matric class yesterday, that isn't it fascinating? We're all discussing like, should we be showering or not, and is anybody doing laundry or not, and we're not eating meat. Do you know why? Because however many thousand years ago the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Is it not fascinating that we're still doing it? And the fact that we're still doing it means that we will have the Beis Hamikdash again. The fact that we haven't forgotten means that we will have the Beis Hamikdash again. So you probably know I think it's a Rashi that speaks about Yaakov, and the fact that Yaakov cried for 22 years after Yosef disappeared. And there Rashi explains, he says that the gift of pain becoming easier after someone dies is given only if the person really died. So this is a gift that Hashem gave to the world, that when somebody loses a person who they love, the pain is intense, very, very intense, and they could never live with that kind of pain. And Hashem allows them to be comforted. That's simply a gift. If the person didn't really die, then Hashem doesn't allow them to be comforted. And this is why Yaakov could not be comforted over Yosef's death, because as we know, Yosef hadn't died. And so the Mefarshim explained to us that this is the same thing with the Beis Hamikdash. The fact that we still keep laws, and we still remember Yerushalayim, and we still fast on Tisha B'Av, and we keep the laws of the 9 days, that is proof that nothing of it died. We are mourning something that is very alive, and please God, we get it back very soon. So that brings us to Pasuk Beis, the second Pasuk. Again, continuing with this picture, Al Aravim B'Socha, on the willows that were in this river, Talinu Kinroiseinu, we hung up our harps. And I'm going to read the next two psukim as well and speak about them all together. Kisham she'eluni shaveinu, because there our captors asked us, Divrei Shir v'Salaleinu, sing for us songs, v'Salaleinu, those who mocked us, Simcha, they said, sing happy songs, Shir lanu mishir Tzion, sing from the songs of Tzion. And our response, Eich nashir shir Hashem, how can we sing the song of Hashem, al admas nechar, on foreign soil? So Again, the picture that we have over here of the Jews being taken into Galus, and the Nebuchadnezzar was very, very cruel. It says that he used to make very big parties, and he would call on the Jews, particularly the Levim, to come and play music. Because remember that the Levim were big musicians, and he wanted them, he instructed them to come and play music, and not only any music, but he was very specific that they should play the music that they used to play in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Levim were having nothing of that. Okay, they were not interested in playing any music, happy music, in the courts of Nebuchadnezzar. And every time they refused, they were killed. And in fact, that's hinted at the words of the Seil Aleinu, which here in Pshat, in ordinary, means those who mocked us. But the commentaries tell us that Talaleinu also means piles, and says there were piles of dead bodies of Levim. Those who refused to play for Nebuchadnezzar, he killed, and he left them in piles. He left their bodies in piles for everyone to see what happens if you refuse Nebuchadnezzar's instruction to play for him. So what did the Levim do to try and help themselves not to have to play for Nebuchadnezzar? Talinu Kinroseinu, they hung up their harps. So they went to the willow trees and they hung their harps in the willow trees, hoping that they would just be able to say, look, we haven't got musical instruments, we can't play. And their response was, is it not enough that you've exiled us from our home? You still want us to play music of Yerushalayim over here? And they refused. It's quite an interesting, fascinating thing to take notice of, again, as a lesson for ourselves. They didn't break their harps, they hung them up. Like you would think that if they were being forced to play this music for Nebuchadnezzar, the best way to prevent themselves from having to play this music would be to stamp on their harps, smash them over something, break them into tiny little pieces. And yet, what did they do? They hung them up in the trees and hid them, because they had absolute belief that one day they will use them again. They didn't give up, and they believed in it. Why was that so important, that they would believe that they would play music again? Is because music is very, very powerful. And we've discussed it many times as we learn Tehillim, that music can move us to all different kinds of emotion. Music can move us to do all different kinds of things. And so the Levim felt that we can't give up on this concept of music, but right now we are not playing the music of the Beis HaMikdash in the courts of Nebuchadnezzar. It's interesting that at the time of the Churban, the rabbis of the time instructed us, and actually became a halacha, that music is forbidden. Absolutely forbidden to have any music, because in honor of, in respect for the fact that we're in exile and the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. Soon after that, the Rabbanim decided that the rabbis of the time said it's impossible for people to live without music. If there is no music, people will just be depressed and they won't be able to accomplish anything in their lives. And so they gave permission that at certain times we are permitted to hear music. So it's quite interesting, because like we go at it the wrong way around. We often say like, oh, we can't hear music during the 3 weeks, or we're not allowed to hear music during Sfira. But actually, that's not the case. We're never allowed to hear music. And then there are some times when we are permitted to listen to music. But there still are certain rules. You might know that in the city of Yerushalayim, you may not eat, have a Seudas mitzvah with a live band, with instruments and band. So the people of Yerushalayim, either they don't have full bands at their weddings and bar mitzvahs, or they have halls just outside the boundaries of Yerushalayim, so that they can have music at their full music at their weddings and bar mitzvahs. And if you wondered why, that's why. Right. Okay, and what did the Levim say as they hung up their music, and when they said, we will not sing, we cannot sing the songs of Hashem al admas nechar, on foreign land, again reminding us that we have to feel all the time that the land we on is foreign land, no matter how comfortable we are or not. Very famous next pasuk, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim, if I forget Yerushalayim, tishkach yamini, let my right hand forget. So what is this? What are they actually saying? So just like a person cannot forget their right hand. Sorry, I left my right hand at home today. And especially in Torah, our right hand represents the hand that we do mitzvahs. It represents our stronger hand. Even if you're left-handed as I am, but the right hand always represents our strong side. And a person doesn't just forget they just can't forget their right hand. So that's how we have to feel about Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash. We cannot forget that we are living in Galus at any time. Another opinion is that what it means, Tishkach Yamini, is that my right hand will forget. In other words, my right hand won't be able to do that which it has been able to do until now. There is such a medrash that says that the Levim actually cut off their right thumbs, so they shouldn't be able to play any music, like that. They couldn't even be forced to do that. And they said, this is like my right hand has forgotten how to do that which you're asking me to do. So this is our announcement, and we make it, and I'm sure you've heard it many times, particularly at weddings, where we say, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim, if I would forget Yerushalayim, it's as though my right hand is not working anymore. Continuation of that, Tidbak lashoni lechiki, my tongue will stick to its palate. Im lo eskerechi, if I don't remember. Im lo a'ale es Yerushalayim, if I don't bring up Yerushalayim, I'll rush simchasi, at the head of my joy. So again, this idea, I won't be able to speak, my tongue will be stuck to my palate. Yerushalayim is absolutely central to our lives. It's interesting that we have a mitzvah to give tzedakah. It always says to give tzedakah at home first, in our own city, before we give anywhere else, except one exception to that rule is to give tzedakah to the people of Yerushalayim. If you know that a place in Yerushalayim needs tzedakah, that would be our first priority. So this concept of it, we have to remember, we have to bring up Yerushalayim, al rosh simchasi, at the head of our happiness, and eskerech, we have to remember Yerushalayim. So Rabbi Akiva took this very, very literally. Rabbi Akiva made a tiara for his wife, and the tiara was a golden image of Yerushalayim. In fact, he's the one who came up with the idea of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, a golden Jerusalem, and he gave it al rosh simchasi, to put on the head of the person who made him happiest, which is the gift that he gave to his wife when he came home from becoming an accomplished man. And he explained how did he come to this idea was from this line of Tehillim, where he says that I won't forget Yerushalayim, even at this time, where here I am with all these students and all this honor and everything that I could want. I will not forget Yerushalayim. And he presented her with this tiara, with this golden tiara. Our custom when our personal joy is that at our weddings, as you know, we smash a glass, right? It's at the moment where a couple are happiest, that they rosh simchasi, it's the height of our personal joy, the custom to smash a glass. There are also many customs among the Yeshivish and Haredi world that the father of the chassan puts ashes on the forehead of the chassan before he walks to the chuppah, and says to him, these ashes are to remind you of the Churban Bayis, of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, at this moment where you are feeling so happy. We also have other mitzvahs, which are what we call Zeichel Churban, to remember, to remind us at all times of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So you may have seen when you come into people's houses that if someone builds or paints a new house, right across from the front door, there would be a patch that they wouldn't finish. They wouldn't finish painting, or they wouldn't finish plastering, or they would leave some way, and we call this the Zecher L'Churban, reminding us as we walk into our home, which we're so proud of, and it's all been renovated and new and beautiful, that we leave a little bit to remind us at all times of the Churban Bayis, that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. We also do not wear all our jewelry at one time. Always leave off something, again, reminding us we mustn't, something that makes us happy, we shouldn't be doing or using all at once. And we're also careful not to put all our silver on the table at one time, except for Pesach, when we are not obligated on Pesach to be feeling like exiles. And so the custom on Pesach is to put all your silver on the table at the Seder, even if you're not using it for the Seder. So it long fascinated me that we keep our most precious silver for Pesach that we're going to use like once or twice during the whole year, and then we put it away till next Pesach. And why is that? Exactly because of this kapitel of Tehillim, which tells us that we have to remember Yerushalayim at all times, and so we don't put all our precious things out all the time on the table. Just as an aside, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, many Jews stopped eating meat and stopped drinking wine. And Rabbi Yeshua asked them why. Like, why have you stopped eating meat and stopped drinking wine? And they said, no, they cannot, they have no appetite to eat meat or to drink wine, because those were things that were used very much in the Beis HaMikdash. And as long as we have a destruction of Beis HaMikdash, we do not want, out of respect to the Beis HaMikdash, we don't want to eat meat or drink wine. And Rabbi Yeshua said to them, what's about bread? Bread was central to the Beis HaMikdash. And when they realized, like, we can't give up eating bread as well as meat and wine and whatever, Rabbi Yeshua said to them, we are obligated to remember and to mourn for the Beis HaMikdash, but we also have to know limits. We have to know that it is wrong to mourn excessively. The person has to know how to mourn properly. We have to remember Yerushalayim. We have to do whatever we have to do to bring the Beis HaMikdash back, to do whatever we have to do to bring Mashiach. But in the meantime, we must raise the meat and the wine. We must use it for mitzvahs. We must say brachas on it. We must make sure it's kosher. We must have guests. We must do all the good things with the meat and wine, and that is bigger respect to the Beis HaMikdash than depriving ourselves of it completely. And it continues, the kapitel continues and says, Zachar Hashem livnei Edom, Hashem remember the people of Edom, the Romans, as Yom Yerushalayim, on that day where they destroyed Yerushalayim. Ha'emrim, they said, Aru, destroy it. Aru ad ha'yisaidba, destroy it to its very foundations. So there's the double wording, Aru, Aru ad ha'yisaidba, talking about the two different Beis HaMikdashes. David HaMelech is predicting that both Batei Mikdash would be destroyed. The first one, Aru, was destroyed, that it couldn't be used anymore. The roof of it was burnt, and it couldn't be used anymore. The second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and ad ha'yisaidba, even its very foundations were destroyed. And so this is the Aru, talking about the first one, Aru ad ha'yisaidba, talking about the second one. Aru ad ha'yisaidba is present tense, okay? Destroying, okay, until its very foundations. And the Medrash Tehillim says something very harsh, which people don't like to hear. Well, I can say I don't like to hear it, but I share it with you anyway. The Medrash Tehillim says that any generation in whose days the Beis HaMikdash is not rebuilt has to ask themselves or consider themselves as though they destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Aru, we are the destroyers of the Beis HaMikdash. And as I said, that's very harsh, but it has to remind us, especially during this time, that we have to do what we have to do to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, and we can't just sit back and let others, but we have to remind ourselves that we can't be the destroyers of the Beis HaMikdash. That's the main part of this kapitel of Tehillim, and the last two little bits of this kapitel are the Levim finding comfort. Okay, because otherwise this is a very depressing kapitel of Tehillim where we speak just about the destruction of Beis HaMikdash, and the Levim find comfort by absolute knowledge that Hashem will pay back the people of Bavel and the people of Edom for destroying the Beis HaMikdash. And so he says, says David HaMelech, Bas Bavel HaSheduda, the nation of Bavel will be destroyed. Ashrei Shalom Lach, fortunate is the person who will pay them back. Es Gemuleich, that which they deserve, Shegamalt Lanu, that which they caused happen to us. Ashrei, fortunate, Sheyoches V'Nipes Es Alayich, is the one who will smash your children, Stella, on the rock, which is the Vim, taking comfort in the fact that no nation will just live on after they've harmed us. And that they like predicting that they will suffer as much horror as they caused on the Jewish people. And we, the Yidden, will be able to say, and if you have a look at the words of the very next capital of Tehillim, I will thank you with all my heart, which is what we're really hoping will happen even before this Tisha B'Av, that we'll be able to turn to Hashem and say, we thank you, Hashem, with all our hearts, because of the fact that we remembered Yerushalayim and we remembered the Beis HaMikdash. All these many years, Hashem will finally give us back the Beis HaMikdash, give us back Yerushalayim, and Mashiach b'mheira b'yameinu. And that brings us to the end of this capital of Tehillim.
Thank you, Rivki. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, Rivki.
Thank you so much.
Sabbath.
Have a good Shabbos and an easy fast, if there shouldn't be one.
Amen. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.